Thank you everyone for joining this afternoon to talk about the digital gap. I would like to share with you a short story because for me, research usually starts with observations of the people that we meet in real life. During COVID time, I have a small NGO together with other Dutch colleagues here in the Netherlands, and we actually got a small grant to do some meetups in the boats in Amsterdam. However, COVID came and we couldn't do it anymore, so we decided to do the trainings and the meetups online. And then we realized that there were some challenges, especially women who have children or didn't have a computer. They didn't join because they didn't have a laptop, and they couldn't join because they only have a phone. And sometimes it's very difficult to follow classes or do your homework or do things with your phone. So we missed some people who were not there, and then we start asking around why they were not there. And then we find out that some of these ladies, they did have children who have homework, or there was only one computer, one laptop at home, and they had to use it and they didn't have the chance. Sometimes they join with the phone. And then we start thinking about this digital gap that starts with the digital device. What happens if you don't have a phone? But in many cases, people do have a smartphone, but they don't have a laptop, a computer, and that is one of the levels of the digital gap. But let's go a little bit to give a context of this presentation, this research, by doing this observation that some people are maybe disconnected because in this case, they didn't have a device to follow classes, to follow courses online. And I think it's important when we are talking about the digital gap that we live in a society, in the digital society, where we take it for granted that we think everyone is connected. But what happened is some people are disconnected. Where is this gap? How we find the people who are actually in the digital gap for different reasons. It could be because they didn't grow up in countries where actually it's more typical to be digital. And in that, I would like to quote a lady, a newcomer, who actually told me when she came to the Netherlands, she thought that she was coming to the future, traveling to the future, to a new planet where you need new skills. People not only speak Dutch in this case, they also speak the digital language, that is a different language. So I think it's very important to take into account that sometimes when people did came from other backgrounds with lower digital skills, they find it that coming to a country like the Netherlands, other countries in Europe, was like traveling to the future. And we need to talk about this because when everything is digital, even if you're not, so everyone expects that you are digital. And sometimes in our society, that you are not digital, you're out of the game, and no one is really giving you the chance to play the game. Because in many cases, now everything from a house dog, basically from the banking, house doctor, everything, education, also learning a language, they send you a link. And it's really a challenge for some of the people that we met, in this case in Europe, in the Netherlands. I would like to give a little bit of the context because sometimes when we live in the Netherlands and in Europe, we think that everyone is connected. When we talk about the digital divide and the digital gap, one of the questions that we need to talk is about who is connected, who is disconnected. And of course, when we talk about connection and disconnection, we have to talk about the internet. As you can see in the screen, there is this map, particularly like the one in black, that you can see the yellow light, whereas the light spots in Europe, America, and also in some spots in the world that are like this. The capital, usually of some countries, have a light spot, but then you travel around and then you have more disconnection. So I think it's something to take into account when people come from this part of the world with less connection, in this case, internet, to countries in Europe where actually everyone is connected, as you can see also. The yellow part, Europe, is like most of our countries and cities are highly connected. One participant of our program, I will tell in a minute more about the program with the newcomers, with the refugee woman, is also a friend. She's from Afghanistan, and she told me when she came to Amsterdam, to the Netherlands, that actually everyone was expecting for her to know what is a QR code. And it's like she never used a train card before, a digital card. You know how to check in with a card, scan a QR code, scan QR code. Like, what is that? And basically also even never use a Google map. And we take it for granted that people know all these skills that also are connected. And it's very important to take it into account that when someone comes from a country and also a context with lower internet penetration, as we saw in the map that we just saw, the map with only the light spots in the capitals, and you come from the countryside or from a country with lower digital connection, you also maybe grow up in a country that you may have a smartphone, but you didn't have a computer or a laptop. So this is a challenge because this digital divide is not an individual lack of skills, it's also an structural, right? So we need to talk about how digital inequality is also a social inequality, something that we have a responsibility because it's not up to the individual, it's also really a structural one that actually when you come to these countries, you have a disadvantage if you grow up in the global south in areas with less connection. And it's for many reasons, right? People may have lower digital skills and lower access when they grow up in school, high school, university, they have less opportunities to develop the digital skills. So we need to take into account that we live in a global digital society, but some societies are more digital than others, and others are still not there. So it's very important to take this into account because digital skills are contextual. If I grew up in this context, I grew up in the Netherlands, I probably know, of course, age, and we can talk about that later if you want. Age play a role too. For younger people, it's easier. When you get older, it's more difficult to learn these skills. However, we need to cover the digital ecosystems. And the topic I would like to focus today is also in the context of refugee women and the reasons why are more affected by this disconnection, this disconnection, or why this digital gap affect in general, of course, in general, more to refugee women coming from these backgrounds. As you can see in the map, also the countries that are in red, in dark red, and the countries that are in red, and then you can see the level of connection, disconnection to mobile internet, specifically for women. So gender roles and taking care of the family, of the children play a role. Also, level of education, age, educational background, and it's important to take into account that in general, the level of connection or the
I think Noemi lost her internet connection for a little bit.
I think so.
Let's see if she comes back. It is very ironic that internet connection is lost the moment that we are talking about connection. So let's all just take a moment to reflect on that.
Maybe our percentages are not that high after all in the Netherlands now. But I don't even have the numbers from there, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, she is now disconnected. Probably she will rejoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also the fact that it's sometimes a surprise here when this happens probably tells us how privileged we are. We're like,
Yes.
oh, I
Yeah.
can't believe the connection went out. I think in many places it's maybe
It's
accepted or
usual, yeah.
standard. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We take it for granted.
Yeah.
But even with places in the Netherlands as well and families that live here, in terms of their budgetary restrictions, the level of internet connection might differ quite a lot. Also, rural areas a little bit here, but it's getting better.
For example, limited gigabytes, like limited data volumes and so on. That's actually not as uncommon as we would think. Yeah, and also like there are these areas of disconnection. When you travel with the train, for example, the border of Germany is always like a deserted area. If you live in a town there, I guess you have bad connection.
Yeah, I did policy analysis into digital inclusion policies, and the rural areas in the Netherlands are also discussed in that regard into the level of connection that they have. But it's very much positioned as a market problem, like the market should be able to solve this and should be able to support the connection there. That's also quite interesting.
Yeah, in the United States, where I come from, it is always described in market terms.
Yeah.
But then secretly you learn that not that secret, but these companies are receiving major amounts of taxpayer monies to expand their services out. And then you find out they decided it wasn't worth it at the end. So they don't go the last mile to connect people. And
Yeah, there
Yeah,
are,
no.
but there are also advocacy groups in the US, especially, right? Who kind of like advocate for connection being a human right and so on, more from the rights perspective. I know that it's probably going down under the liberal agenda, but still.
Yeah, definitely. There's some really interesting case studies also of like municipal Wi-Fi networks, like certain places, Chattanooga, Tennessee, or like places you wouldn't even expect to be more liberal, that
Yeah.
will have these kinds of projects to make a public Wi-Fi or internet system
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was being discussed here as well, like public Wi-Fi, right to connection, and so on. It's in some cities, like in Berlin, I think they did try it. I don't know if it's continuing, but that's also an interesting thing. But it's again very urban focused, of course.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh,
I
Naomi's
see
maybe
that
back.
Noemi
Okay,
has
I was going to write to
joined.
her. Nice.
Hi, everyone. And yes, feel also very free to participate in the chat. It's really nice to see everyone saying hi there.
Exactly.
But also, if you have questions. Hi, Noemi, welcome back.
I have no idea what happened. I thought I was connected and suddenly I wasn't. I don't know. It was yes. Okay, I didn't know. My laptop was
No,
connected. So I went out and in and I'm back. Yes.
it's absolutely fine. It gave us a chance to talk about the privilege of connection. So that was really. Are
That's
you
a
able to
good,
share
yes.
your slides again?
1 second, 1 second. Yes. The connection and disconnection, right? It's really like, I also, yes, have very interesting conversations the last times when people in Iran couldn't connect because of, you all know why, and it was very difficult for some people to be disconnected and having no news from their family and being not able to connect online. It's a huge disconnection where we live different communities in different countries. 1 second, I think I'm here. Let me see if I can set it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, 1 second. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I closed also my presentation, so I had to open it again. So thank you for your
Oh,
patience.
no.
Once again. It was
No
like
worries at all.
everything. Yes, I was sending the presentation before, but now in the settings, yeah, it's here.
I think it's also good to know that Noemi is not at the office or at her home now. She she was at a conference, so I think that might also have to do with the connection issues that she might be facing.
Yes, and the funny thing is the title of the conference is Digital Society. So yes, here we are trying to connect in the disconnection of the Digital Society conference to talk about connection, disconnection, and inclusion. Yes, and it's funny because I'm trying to, and it doesn't show me the same screen. Maybe you see the background on my laptop.
No, I don't see. Yes,
No.
we are starting to see something now.
No, is this?
It's a very big docs.
No.
Yes, this is working. Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is the digital technological things happen also when we talk about the digital divide. So we're also talking about that the digital divide is more than internet access. Of course, it plays a role. When we talk about the digital inequalities, we also need to talk about the material access. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this one because I experienced in the programs that we've been running with newcomers that this is actually something that happens, that many times people do have a smartphone, they do have a phone, and then one lady that participated in our program was saying, that society thinks because I have a smartphone, I know how to do everything. However, I never use my phone to do a PowerPoint or Excel. I only use it for chat and calls. And it's interesting, there is also even a terminology for some of us who are academics on mobile under class. And it's important because somehow it's interesting that when people apply, for example, to a program at university or to find employment, if you never use a computer or a laptop, sometimes you need to fill a form, and it's very difficult to fill a form in your phone, and sometimes the forms are created to fill with a computer, and it's challenging to do it with a phone. And it's interesting because somehow we take it for granted. We assume that everyone knows how to use all these devices, even including, well, basically material access. It doesn't always mean that people have the skills. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the program that we developed at Radboud University with the newcomers. The last year, the program is called Digital Newcomers. But first, I'm going to start with the program that we did 2 years ago and why we realized that it was fundamental to start doing this type of projects and what is the dynamic, how it works. So we realized that from access to empowerment, it was very important to build on digital integration. And the question was like, no, it's only who is in the room, who is not in the room, and could be there. We asked these questions to ourselves because 2 years ago, we realized that in the welcome newcomers, 80% of the participants who were accepted were guys, were men, and we have very few ladies that participate in our program. And we look back to what were the reasons, and there were different reasons, of course. And one, it was also, yes, we actually asked people to have English level B2, so then we kind of adapt a little bit the requirements. But it was very interesting that in the moment we create a program for women, we have tons of applications, like about 60. We only have 20 positions for 20 participants. It was very challenging because suddenly we did have many participants. When we asked them why they joined this program, one thing was also interesting to hear is because it was for them. It was interesting that the refugee women sometimes feel more difficult to participate in a bigger group, but also are less used to participate especially from some countries. But also one of the reasons is many of them, they didn't have a laptop or computer to send the application. It was interesting because one girl who also was from this, she was a bit younger, and she did send us this post. As you can see, it was typed in Instagram with her phone, and this was her application letter. This was 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, so before ChatGPT. Now, the last year, we also got some people who applied with this motivation letter being written by ChatGPT. So now we also need to teach how to use artificial intelligence or how to use it in the best way. But actually, it was very interesting to see that somehow, if this application goes through regular channels, this person will never participate in the program. Why? Because applications don't accept pictures. This was a picture of a screenshot of Instagram. So we need to also rethink what happened when the digital gap is hitting some people who don't have a laptop or the skills, or actually also like Microsoft, and they can write in a Word document. So this was happened 2 years ago, and many of these participants, as I say, they didn't have a laptop, a device, and then we create this program. However, then we realized that, of course, they need to learn Dutch, English, and also basically most of them did have higher education in their countries. However, the digital literacy was quite low, and of course was a bit diverse, depends on age, country background, but we realized that it was anyways a challenge. Because if you are not, don't have many digital skills, or you're not very good at that, it's more difficult to learn a language. Some of the participants say that when they go to Dutch classes, the teachers send them, oh, here you go, a link to practice by yourself. And it's also this digitalization also of education. We had the same in the context of university, that many of our programs, we use Brightspace. Some of them actually did find it challenging to participate because they didn't know how to use that. So part of the program was actually about digital connection and empowerment. And well, 2 things that I think is relevant to mention on the context of from access to empowerment. Empowerment means that sometimes also people feel a little bit afraid to say that they don't know something. In the program that we had this year, in the first workshop, we asked them to connect to internet, to Wi-Fi at the university. They receive an email with the user number, and they had to create a password. For some of them, that step was they were trying to do it, but we need to help them, and it took us almost an hour that everyone logged in. And then we realized also that sometimes this step by step, we assume that everyone is in a level that maybe they are not there, but they feel very ashamed to ask. So we realized that what was helping the most to have a buddy program. So the buddies are students, are people who actually are very used to use these things, but then you have a person next to you. It's much easier to ask than when you have a big classroom, even if it's not big with 12 participants. But it was very important that this empowerment came from connection, and connection came actually more positive feedback from the buddy program than actually from all these workshops that we did, trainings, and we realized that we need to invest more time on this creating autonomy, but autonomy was actually developed by this buddy program. And also this year, and actually in 2 weeks, this program is still work in progress. We're also going to have a digital cafe where the students, the participants, the newcomers can come and ask questions, so someone can sit next to them and say, well, I would like to do a PowerPoint for my class, or I really struggle to make an appointment with a house doctor. So it was really important to see that it was important to create mentor programs who were actually not that much top-down education, more creating connection. So that's something I wanted to share with you, and would like to highlight that something that we learned doing this project was actually how important it is to include their voice and ask them, what would you like to learn? Also doing the intake interview and including them on this process of learning. But also everyone is in a different journey, this digital journey. Not everyone is at the same point. So that is a little bit of a challenge when you create these kind of programs. So we try to back up this with the buddy program, and also with this digital cafe where people can drop by and ask questions. And something that we find it interesting to share with you, that we realized that developing this mentor program, the participants say, people always tell me, do this, do that, but what helps me the most is when someone sits next to me and do it with me. Otherwise, sometimes it's very challenging to follow all these workshops, all these trainings. So empowerment starts with connection. And that connection actually really facilitates that people can develop these skills step by step. But I think it's very important that we meet people where they are. We don't take it for granted. And at the same time, we also create programs that are basically helping people where they are. This was one of the quotes I mentioned, that people give me these links, these quotes, these also videos in YouTube, but then sometimes I don't understand them. If one person sits next to me and then help me to do this, to do that, step by step, is the best way. And of course, community building, eating together, having coffee, and enjoying this buddy program being one of the highlights that the participants really appreciate, because in this one we build trust and engagement, and that also really helps with capacity building, and at the end of the day, build equity and creating opportunities that actually many of these participants, needed the time. And it's really true that this program takes more time, and we also need to actually do it step by step. But we realized that somehow, as you can see also one quote that you can read in this screen, with my Dutch buddy help, I learned to navigate digital tools, and I don't feel completely foreign like before. I also feel like I'm a student and a participant, and also become a friend. And that's also really this human connection. So we cannot forget that teaching digital skills is very important if we do it also with this one-to-one approach, with this connecting in a way that somehow build the connection, and that also helps with connecting online. And this is a quote from another participant that says he was afraid to turn the computer on, and now after following this program and also having a buddy helping her to navigate the digital space, now she can even help her daughter with her homework. So this is a little bit about the project, and we thought it was nice to have some time for questions. So please, I have some questions for you, but I think maybe you also have some questions for me. My main question is also to see how we can co-create this kind of digital programs, where basically we also realize that we have this collective responsibility when actually we want to create programs that are more inclusive. We also need to bring this bridge, this gap, So mind the digital gap. So we create programs that are tailored for everyone, wherever they are in this digital journey, that we meet and we go with them to follow the journey, to basically travel in this digital society. We're all learning, right? I've been in this conference today about the digital society, and I think we're all in the same boat, but some people need a little bit of guidance during this navigating the digital journey. So thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to listen to your questions and have a conversation.
Very interesting, Noemi. Thank you so much. Yes, I will also applaud you. This was great. I think you can maybe stop sharing the presentation and then we can
yes,
see each
have a
other maybe a bit
conversation, yes.
better.
Much better, yes.
Because I think what you are saying, it resonates a lot, especially with what I've been doing. I can tell you a bit more about that in a bit. But I think also with what the people here who are attending the webinar are thinking and doing. I see some interesting things in the chat already. I will discuss that a bit later. But first, we'll do a short interview style thing as well. So what I was thinking about and what you mentioned on the slides was also inclusive policies. So this, Chidem will know this, that this is right up my alley because this is what I'm focusing on now. And what you said about empowerment comes from connection, I think that really resonated with me. I think the personal support in navigating these digital environments and developing digital skills is such an important factor. But it also means that the interventions and programs are sometimes maybe very much reliant on volunteers, sometimes maybe organized a bit more ad hoc. In policies, or at least in national policies, there's not a lot of room for different cultural perspectives or backgrounds. What would your advice be to, on a national level, also include these groups more and develop more inclusive policies? Can you tell me a bit more about that? Is there maybe room for the refugee women to actually join on policy consultations, or?
That would be great, right? Because when we talk about this, it's also a consultation and participation. And I think sometimes because we don't start with consultation and including we do policies for them, without them, and that is sometimes without realizing. And I think if policymakers, because the policymakers need to see the practical side of that, that if these people are disconnected from society, they also need more help. So if they are not able to do this by themselves, they need someone to do it for them or with them. So sometimes also in health and in many topics, if people get disconnected, at the end of the day, public services someone has to cover for that. So I think maybe in the practical way, how we can create inclusive policies that realize. And I find it also interesting on the question, I don't know exactly your question, Denise, but also policies that are also tailored to bring the gap because women coming from some of these backgrounds, they actually didn't have the same opportunities that men in their communities, in their societies, and this digital literacy and literacy in general, by being lower, when they come here, when most people grew up with similar education, of course there's some difference, but it's still like there is a common ground. But then if we don't actually realize that, they're always going to be disconnected because they don't have the education and they don't have the tools, and this society requires that they are digital and they are not, and that's really a big challenge. But I think community building or started with grassroots initiative in the neighborhood, in communities, how policymakers can also start knowing what are the challenges that they experience, what are the barriers that they experience. And I think going from neighborhoods, from communities to the local level, to the national level, could be a way. Because I think sometimes the politicians in the national level are very disconnected, but in a local level, some of these gemeentes, some of these municipalities are more connected with communities who are doing the small things. And I agree with you that the challenge that many times is with volunteers, with projects short term, and this is one of the challenges that need more attention from public policy. Otherwise, these small initiatives sometimes are very nice, but they end up because of lack of resources.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, you also say maybe actually turn the policy process upside down and actually start from the communities themselves and work up to national level policies.
Yes, because I think sometimes when people come from a very different cultural background, I also realize that sometimes we project that we know what they need. But I was recently in Kenya in a conference with people from Somalia, from Eritrea, and I learned a lot from them because my perspective also of gender is very Western and very European. So sometimes when you work with a community, it can help you to realize, okay, we are in the Netherlands, we are in Europe, and people need to adapt to this society. But if I understand more where they're coming from, it may also help that we also kind of really connect, because sometimes we really like, yes, we're all more ethnocentric that we want to recognize, and sometimes we don't meet people where they are, and that creates some misunderstanding, and they end up in their community more and more because they don't feel the connection with the other communities. But that's another conversation. But I agree with you. I do see what we're talking about. Even the educational programs, when we do the educational programs, it's very interesting that we get most positive feedback was the one-to-one body program. So yeah, the workshops were nice, but the body program is what really helped me. It was my body who really helped me to learn this and that. So I think this community mindset, because also people come from countries that are more community oriented, it may be the best way to start building up and yes, doing this reverse policy.
That's really nice. Can I ask a follow-up question about that? Because you're saying meeting people where they are, a lot of focus on community-based projects. They're also, especially because when you start with this buddy project, they're often not digital yet. They're not in online spaces yet. So they may be also more difficult to reach. How did that work for you in this research project and with setting up the buddy system? Did you have contact with the As It Says, or did you offer it to them in different ways?
How do we get the participants for this project?
Yes.
Yes, well, one of the yes, well, with COA, our university, with COA, but also I actually, this year we did it different, but half of the participants are still in COA, and the others it was through my network and people working in the Dutch schools, but also in NGOs like Yala Foundation, other NGOs who send us participants. And the challenge is there are always more participants than possibilities to accept people in the program. But then it went via someone who was working with them. So many times. And this year we did accept few ladies who did already asylum seekers, so they are a bit more connected. So they find out through the Dutch classes, the Dutch teacher told them about it. But it's true that somehow when we have, how do we connect with people who are not in the digital society or a bit more disconnected to find them where they are, right? So, and what I find it interesting of this process, especially when they are in COA, in this time of waiting, for them it really means a lot to go to university and then say, finally, I'm a student, I enter a place, and it's a place I recognize and I belong. So it's beyond the education, it's more a sense of normal life. I can go to a place where I have something to do. But yes, it's important. Connected to your question, Denise, it's true that also sometimes realize participate in a project also with people, women who were married and their husband were from Eritrea or Afghanistan, and many of them when their husband get a job, the municipalities lost track of them, and they sometimes go to the household, they take care of the kids, and they're more in the community, and some of them are hard to reach for the government and also for these programs. Because our program is mainly connected with SSA, with COA, so somehow they're still there, so they got more possibilities when something happens, someone tell them at some point. Yes, that's a good question. How we reach the ones who are less digital.
Yes, yeah, and because I think that is an ongoing challenge for support, but also for research. But this sounds very interesting. I have a bunch of other questions, but I think I already saw some questions in the chat. I think Will, was it? I think you also raised your hand. So are you also okay with me opening up the floor for a Q&A, Noemi?
Great. Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, maybe let's start with Will, and then I will read the questions in the chat, and we can move on to that afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Noemi, for your talk. It's really interesting. I've been doing some work with refugees here in Tilburg, in the south of the country, and so a lot of what you said is really helpful and kind of resonates with questions I've been asking as well. So thank you for that. And one of those things, it was kind of a minor point that you made, but I've also been thinking about this question as well. So you mentioned in an earlier slide that people don't necessarily lack digital skills. They come from different digital ecosystems. And also I find that people have different experiences with different kinds of digital systems that they access and use. Like people were operating fine in their own country often, like they were very skilled in that environment for what they needed. So I liked that perspective, and I wondered if you had more to say about that, or if that came up more often in your research.
Yeah, that's very good point, because somehow people when they come here, it's interesting. Even with Ukrainians, Ukrainians sometimes say, when I came to the Netherlands, everyone sent emails. We don't send emails. It's very old fashioned. And then here everyone send. Even Ukrainians are digitally quite qualified, right? Because the country is very digital. I mean, Zelensky, we know, is always in social media, and so it's quite. But still, the way they use it for them was like, I never write emails before, and now I cannot use Telegram anymore. I had to use WhatsApp and emails. So even coming from a different country where you think, well, I knew everything, and now it's like, why do you have to use? So that's and it's true that coming sometimes from African countries where they use their phone for everything, and they use the phone a lot, but then they maybe they were not used to do more of this Microsoft package, or like, oh, a PowerPoint. I never done a PowerPoint. However, I know how to navigate. I even know how to do social media and connected to, I don't know if it's exactly connected to your question, but I also find it interesting how also people find their ways to use social media. So actually, seen and attend an event that we organized with Afghan ladies, and then after one of these ladies sent a video with emoticons, because she doesn't want to have her face there. And it's actually a video on TikTok that have more than 1,500 views. I mean, I never post something that have almost 2,000 views. And she recreate her way of doing that. So it's true also people find their tactics or their ways. For example, in this case, people who don't want to have their face on the spot, but find other ways to participate in social media. So I also find it interesting to also take into account that the tactics or the way they use it, the copy mechanisms, or in their country, in their context, they used to do that. But when they come here, they may be lack of some skills that are highly necessary here. Like, for example, having a LinkedIn profile. No one has a LinkedIn profile. We did a workshop 2 weeks ago. One lady, but she never used it. She lived here for a bit longer, because you don't need it, because if no one is in LinkedIn, why would you be in LinkedIn, right? So it's also interesting your question and comment, because it's true. Different ways, and somehow when you can hear, you need a LinkedIn profile, because otherwise you don't exist in the context of employment, right? Everyone is going to look for you. But you may come from in your context, you were doing fine. You were actually, your skills were more than enough, but then you can hear and you need to develop other skills that are considered more relevant, or use them in a different way.
It's great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, then I would propose to move to the chat first. So Asli had a comment about the instance of disconnection, urged her to continue advocating for connection as a human right, but also as public comments with no expenses attached. And she hopes to get there someday. Maybe you want to, are you still here? Yes. Maybe if you want to explore that a bit further, you're very welcome to. But Noemi, I was also wondering what you think of this. Should this connection also be a human right, or do you see how people are navigating that lack of connection maybe sometimes? And I am also curious, how is that in the refugee centers that you are working with? How is connection taken care of there?
Connection in a human connection. in
So
the context
digital
of
connection, I think either like a 4G internet connection or Wi-Fi. So
yeah
connecting
yeah
to that in the chat.
I find it, yes, it's like um yeah, so with this yes, it's kind of like, so one thing is that sometimes people think connection is to have Wi-Fi, or connection is also to create a QR code. I was last year in one of the COA that they develop a QR code for safety. But then I was asking them, did you ask them if they know how to use it, if they want to use it? Because it was safety in case it was a fire or some woman was walking alone in the refugee camp at night, and then say, oh, well, then here you can have a QR code. And yes, you maybe create this connection. You maybe have Wi-Fi in the camp, and maybe yes, but then sometimes you also need to realize if the person feel comfortable with that, or if this is something in a way they would like to connect, because maybe it doesn't feel safe to have a code, a QR code, and you don't even know who is the person who is going to come to. I don't know. So I did have a conversation with some of them and say, I don't know. I'm not going to link on a QR code if I don't know who is the person behind that. I don't know who is behind the QR code. So sometimes culturally, I think that society has a high trust, or trust on digital skills, or trust on who is behind that. These people trust. But if you come from a society or from a country, or you're also in a vulnerable situation because you don't have papers yet, sometimes people don't trust who is behind this link, who is behind this QR code, what are you going to use my information for? So some people also may have the skills, the connection, however, maybe feel a bit unsafe because they don't understand, or they have a lot of uncertainty behind who is behind this digital code, who is behind this, how they're going to use this information. And that's something important to.
Yeah, and I think that also links back to the need for connection and community again, right? Instead of this anonymous kind of black box behind a QR code. Yes. Then we have another question. I'm not fully sure if I understand this. This is by Lazar. Digital divide is digital rift is quite common between developed and developing countries. What are your views on causes of the rift? Can you elaborate on initiatives and solutions? Maybe if you can elaborate on your question a little bit. Otherwise, I can try to rephrase it a little bit. Do you have some interesting initiatives? So I think what you are doing already with the Buddy program is great to tackle some issues coming out of that digital divide. Do you have other like good initiatives that you know of that can contribute to this ongoing development?
If you're trying to see if it's in the context of here, of the Netherlands, also developing countries, the gap when the people come here, right?
I
Or
think
like,
so.
yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
very sure what the context of the question is, but
Yeah, I think also in some developing countries, there are also very interesting initiative. Yeah, so I think so. So we can also learn from them or see what they are doing. Recently, I went to Kenya, and in Kampala, in the refugee camp, they are developing also, they have a library with computers, and they are trying to even if they're the refugees, they are trying to help them to develop basic digital skills online. So I think also some developing countries or some places, they're trying their best because they know it's important in our society, right? And I find it, yes, what can we do about that when people come here? I think that also when we talk about this community building, or like creating spaces like the library, in many of our cities also the library is a place. But one thing I would like to mention about, in case we are talking about people when they are here, in the Netherlands, there are many initiatives. But for example, I work in Radboud University in Nijmegen, and at the library, they have a digital program where you can have a digital cafe and you can go there and ask questions. However, I went back to the ladies in the program and I say, do you know that there is a digital cafe in the library that you can go? No one knew about it. And then I went back to the library and I have a meeting with them. Very friendly people say, yeah, of course, they can come anytime. If they want to do it in English, in Dutch, we're open to both. but they didn't know. So yes, the information was there, the possibilities there, but sometimes this information doesn't reach in this group. And there are possibilities, and actually now they wanted to have more newcomers because they know there is a need in the municipality to bring the newcomers to have higher digital skills. So they actually would like to participate. So I think we need to create in our society more collaboration, universities, libraries, communities, all of us, if we collaborate, some of this information and possibilities that are there sometimes don't reach the right target.
Yeah, and I think so. I've been doing some volunteer work at a refugee location as well, but not in terms of digital skills, but in terms of reading with younger children. And a part of that program is also to try to encourage them to get a free library subscription for the children under 18. But it's also a big step to go from the asset sale location to actually go to the library and to ask someone whether they can sign up. There's still a big language difference. So I can also understand that maybe that might have some difficulties as well.
And that was something very, very good point. We actually then tell them, okay, maybe you can tell your buddy, because there is also a cafe that you go with your buddy, you have a copy of the library, and then your buddy introduced, because then it's kind of like a mediation. And if they are introduced, they're most likely to go. And also sometimes because they come from more community societies, if they go together, if two of them go, maybe they dare to go. But you're right, it's a very new place. You don't know and then people will not go by themselves, most likely. So you have a buddy, or you have someone who introduces you, or sometimes the Talmach, someone who is helping them to learn Dutch, go with them, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one more question in the chat also about the language. So Anastasia is saying, Noemi, thank you so much for your insightful presentation and for dedicating your project to such an important topic, which is already such a nice comment. Could you tell us, please, what language you use when working with migrants and refugees for your research and how you address the language barrier?
This is a very important question, and I find it, yes, somehow. So this year, we have situations where actually we told the participants that they could speak in the language they prefer. And we have some trainers who are Arabic speaking, and I actually did try to bring trainers who are from a similar background, and they could also switch. Sometimes they also help each other. And sometimes some of the participants, their Dutch is better than their English, or vice versa. So we've been having, yes, very interesting conversations, but also sometimes, but then try to create a safe space, because sometimes people apologize because the word doesn't come out in the right language. And we say, yeah, it's fine. And then usually there's someone in the group who can translate, so we can communicate. But this is a challenge, and this is something important. Trying to see some of them who want to follow higher education, they do prefer, because we did ask, some of them prefer in English because they would like to follow higher education in English. Some of them, especially the ones who want to work, prefer to follow their education in Dutch because they have to, and somehow, yes. But it's quite mixed, and but I think it's nice to create this atmosphere where also people feel free to say a word in your language, and hopefully there is someone there. And nowadays also with our phones and AI, we can also help each other to say, oh, how do you say this word? But it is a challenge, and it's through creating these programs tailored to what the person prefer, or in that moment, I would like to prefer to continue my education in Dutch or in English, and try to listen to that. Yes.
That's really great. I know that Chidem, yes. Do you
Yes.
want to pose a question?
Yes, thank you so
And then
much.
we're also
Noemi.
moving
I think
towards the end of the webinar.
Yes.
yeah, unless there's an urgent question, I can also give the floor otherwise. Yeah, thank you. And I think this like interactive discussion was also very nice and opening a lot of dimensions of the topic. I think what you're saying is also in what you said, you can see that like digital inclusion and social inclusion, like being socially connected, they go really hand in hand. We can't really think of digital inclusion as something that's just related to, let's say, identifiable technical skills or something like that. It's much more about the human connection and so on. So if you're socially connected, you will also be better digitally included, let's say. Does it also go the other way around? Like, do you see any instances of people who are kind of good in navigating the digital environments? Are they also being able to make easier social connections or find their way through the digital means, let's say? Um, is it like, how do you see this relationship between social and digital inclusion? I don't know if it's a too
Yeah,
general question.
sure. Yes. No, that's, yeah, I think it's especially because that society is quite digital. I think it does facilitate, and I think sometimes, okay, the digital skills, for example, you can see that with Ukrainians who came here, who actually find work and employment. I interviewed some Ukrainians who did find a job via WhatsApp or LinkedIn. Immediately they log in on LinkedIn and they kind of, so it was easier for them to build a social capital because they did have the social skills, the digital skills. So the digital skills and the social media was helping to build the social capital. And the social capital was also reinforced by having these skills to navigate the digital system and then being able to have a profile in LinkedIn or use social media. And that was helping to build also like the social network or the social environment because the digital skills and connecting with people in the Netherlands. Um, However, like also with some of the ladies from other countries who actually, I think it's a combination of language, people who do speak English when they come here, plus they have higher digital skills, they have more chances to find things, find their way, find connections, build connections. And the ones who have no level of English, they don't know Dutch, and kind of like that digital disconnection plus linguistic disconnection, or like lack of linguistic skills when it overlaps, I think is extremely challenging. Seeing that it's very difficult because also very difficult to see the question from Anastasia before. In which language do you deliver a workshop or training if it's not English, if it's not Dutch? And yes, sometimes you can go back to Arabic, but then you also, they need to connect with society here. If they only in their circle of people, they will never learn, right? So it's very challenging to see, and the disconnection is, yeah, but I do believe that, yeah, digital skills do help people in this country for sure to build their connections, also because it's a very digital society, so everything is online, so it does help. Yeah, it's a good step, and I think the connection with linguistic skill or like possibilities to also navigate, and also people who don't know the language but have the digital skills can translate and overcome the gap of not knowing Dutch, because you can translate it with all the AI tools nowadays. But if you don't have that, we also have some participants in the group. I never use AI because I'm very afraid, and that's also really like, if the person is afraid to use also to be in social media, that fear also is not only the skills, is the need to start trusting the digital society. Otherwise, it's like, if you don't want to be there, it's going to be very difficult to be in this society because everything is very digital. But at the same time, we also need to learn from them about community, and I think that's something also. I think we also see the positive side of connecting one-to-one, this kind of community building, digital cafes, or creating more connecting communities could help them, but maybe also help us in our society, that we are all digital, being online, and we also need the connection one-to-one. But yeah, it's an interesting question. If having more digital skills help you also to develop more social skills or more social network in this context. And yeah, it can help, yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Naomi.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We have time for one last question. Asli, take the floor.
Sorry, I didn't
Welcome.
really want to take the floor almost again because one comment that I made in the chat was already addressed very well. Thank you so much. All very interesting. I mean, I just have a ton of questions, of course, but I'm just going to choose one very controversial one for us to maybe reflect on also after this event. I was actually wondering your idea, since you're also in the field of language. I think it's hybrid work that you're doing, Noemi, in terms of, language and communication, the field of language and communication. It's really interesting in the sense that I was checking the last policies, the governance policies, and in Czech Republic, something very interesting happened, I think 2 years ago, also with the advocacy of a digital rights organization, the right to analog item in one of their laws. Because a lot of the elderly, older generation, would actually just not be able to follow up with what's going on in terms of all digital, let's say, approach of the government, and also, the local municipalities. That on one side, and also, digital payment, because a lot of the people, that actually defend their rights to analog do not also want to do all their payments digitally, basically, and they should definitely have the right to analog in that sense as well.
Yeah.
So I was actually wondering whether you think this, migration, the thread of migration on its own, and the different needs of these communities, and also, the aspect of community building on their own, and the self-organizations that they're building, or we're building, somehow could open the doors for such advocacy as well, because a lot of these issues just get lost in isolation, because of the different priorities, and all the different debates that are somehow pulling us back to what we already see as our own priorities, basically, but not the very marginalized or the vulnerable populations. And it just so seems that sometimes the needs of the most impacted and the most vulnerable actually speak to the general needs. And I think that in this aspect, right to analog could actually be very, very relevant for just anyone involved. I was really wondering what your take is on this issue, and possibly related to the project that you're also carrying out. Thank you, though. I mean, it was really interesting.
Yes, it's a very good point, and I agree. I think the right to analog, or the right to communities to navigate, to do things in an analog way, what you say, it also, we also need that, right? To have a choice, because sometimes our politicians or government is making decisions on behalf of us, and we have no choice. It has to be digital, even if we don't want to. And I think that's also point out as something that we also maybe need to also, what you say is very interesting, how these communities are actually resisting a bit more, and then somehow maybe also will help us to see how far we want to go, right? On being digital, or having the two options and being able to choose. Yes. Because now with the chatbots, now you cannot speak with a person anymore in any bank or any service that you call, and it's like, I want to have the right to speak with a person. I want to go analog. I don't want to talk with a chatbot. Thank you very much. Yes, very good point that you raised. Yes, I see. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
On that note, I think it's time to kind of round up this webinar. I will stop the recording here.